Hello, folks. Welcome to the Manly Pinterest Tip Show. I'm Jeff C., and you're not. And we are very excited to have you guys here with us today for the Manly Pinterest Tip Show. I'd love for you guys to head over to manlypinteresttips.com and subscribe to our email community. That way you'll never miss out on one of these awesome shows that we have. So today I'm very excited to announce we have Danny Maloney from Tailwind here with us. And Danny is an internet entrepreneur who has spent his career building consumer internet businesses that connect consumers to each other and to brands more effectively. Currently, Danny is CEO and co-founder of Tailwind, the world's leading Pinterest marketing platform. Tailwind is currently helping over 20,000 leading brands and agencies build a highly engaged presence on today's hottest social network. Danny, thanks so much for being here with us.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, this is going to be a fun show. I know there's going to be a lot of questions from the audience. So as I'm talking to Danny today, if you guys have questions in the live audience, make sure you enter those into that comment stream, and we'll try to pull them up and get those answered for you today. So let's dive in really quick to some of the questions, Danny.
Okay.
Tell me a little bit about your backstory and kind of how you got involved in social media, and how did Tailwind get started?
Yeah, sure. So I started out, I guess I'll try to give you the quick version of the story, but I started my first company when I was in college, actually, and that was when I fell in love with the internet generally as a field. It was my first exposure. Built a nice little business, but also learned that I had no idea how to scale it. So I decided to go learn from others who knew more. Ended up working out at Google on the West Coast for a number of years, and so my entry to social was through YouTube, actually. After the YouTube acquisition, I moved over into a role on the YouTube side that was on the partnerships team, working with some of the up-and-coming YouTube stars and figuring out how we were going to help evolve the content over time to build the network. So that was a lot of fun. Loved the social element, loved the visual element. After that, I moved to New York and took a role at AOL for a couple years working on the video business there, and had some broader exposure to the media team. And so that's actually where I met my co-founder, Alex. And we just sort of had this idea to start building a visual search engine back in 2011. Sort of similar to Pinterest, but very, very targeted to a specific niche. Mm-hmm. And ironically, when Pinterest started blowing up later that year, it began sending us a lot of traffic. So we were looking at the analytics for Pinterest and looking at data related to our own site, mostly as a marketer, when it struck us that the rise of the visual web plus the rise of social was going to lead to this whole need for new tools and new capabilities in order for marketers to be able to participate. We had built a few of those tools for ourselves and only our own use, but decided, hey, let's try opening this up. Maybe other people could get use out of it, and 2.5 years later, here we are. It's gone by really, really quickly, but I think what we're finding over time is the needs are only accelerating the deeper we go.
Awesome. So Tailwind, kind of tell people who aren't really associated with it or know much about it, what it is, and why did you name it Tailwind? I would like to know that story.
Yeah, sure. So I'll start with what it is. Then I'll try to give you the short version of the naming story.
Okay.
But for a long time, people have known us as a Pinterest analytics platform, and we're beginning to change the way that we explain that ourselves. I mean, today the truth is we're a Pinterest marketing platform, but I think that what we do ultimately could extend even further. The differentiation there between analytics and marketing is we started out with analytics to help people learn about what was happening on Pinterest and to evolve their own strategy. And then over time, what we've heard of more and more is, what do I do with all this information, right? Like, it's great to have a bunch of reports, but I don't have 6 hours to sit around and then spend 30 hours acting on it. I need to get to the insight and the action quicker. So as we shift to a broader marketing platform, I think you're going to see a lot of new capabilities coming out that are helping people get to the impact without necessarily having to be a data scientist themselves. One of our team members likes to call it data science as a service, which I think is kind of a cool way to think about it. Now, in terms of the name, we started out with a different name that was, honestly not a very good one and not something we liked that much from the beginning. But we realized that we were going to have to rebrand last year. I guess at this point it's maybe 1.5 years ago. So we actually went through a process that, very similar to our product development process, involved our users. And we started asking them questions like, what does the tool do for you? What do we as a company mean to you? And it had a pretty elaborate, actually, kind of like survey and research process. Ultimately narrowed it down to a few names, but Tailwind was the one that seemed to jump out to our users because the message we heard is they viewed us as a force that pushed them towards their goals and helped them get there more efficiently. And we really liked that. We said, that for one, it's a broader theme that we could grow into as we become a bigger company. But on top of that, it was just very aspirational, very positive, and that's the mentality that a lot of our customers are in and that Pinterest users are in as well. So it seemed to fit all the way around. We loved it. We went with it. It feels like it's been our name all along at this point.
Gotcha. So let's take a real big bird's eye view of this. Maybe somebody's coming in who, they've heard of analytics and they're supposed to use them. They've heard of Google Analytics. Why in the world would somebody want to use analytics for Pinterest? Just kind of a general overview. What can it do for them?
Yeah, I mean, I think the easiest high-level solution to this is if you think about what people are doing when they're on Pinterest, right? Generally, it's very aspirational. People are telling you, this is what I want my kitchen to look like when I do a remodel. This is how I want my wedding to be. This is the car that I want. This is how I'm going to change my body and get healthier and eat healthier, right? So people are essentially telling you the life that they want to live. And as a marketer, that's basically a dream come true, right? Because we spend all this time as marketers trying to understand our audience. Now here's this platform where they're just telling us their aspirations and their dreams, and we can learn about that and become better marketers. So the analytics really is just surfacing the data underneath all of that, and it's incredibly, incredibly powerful.
Gotcha. Here's a question from my friend Mike Alton, and he asked this early on this week. He goes, for small business owners who only have just a few minutes a day for social media overall, not just Pinterest, what are some key metrics that they should be looking for to gauge performance and effectiveness?
Absolutely, and I would say, first, great question, Mike. Secondly, I think it depends on the type of business, right? So the same metrics shouldn't apply to everyone. If you are a small business owner, but let's say you have a website with a lot of visual content and you're trying to actively drive people there, so maybe a small e-commerce site, for instance, then the number one metric I would look at is the number of pins being originated from your domain, or what we call domain pins. If people are pinning from your site more, that's going to drive more visitors back to your site, and that creates just a natural viral marketing loop. On the other hand, if that's not necessarily your objective, there might be other metrics that you want to look at. So one question I get a lot is, if I'm in a service industry or I have a B2B company where we don't necessarily have as much visual content, or where we don't have products that we're trying to pin, what should I look at? And there I think the virality of what you do pin becomes the most important metric, right? So is the content that you're pinning, whether it originates from your site or not, growing in popularity over time? Is it being repinned more often? Is it reaching larger audiences? Because for that type of business, your primary advantage of using Pinterest is probably going to be a branding and education play as opposed to an immediate conversion. So in that type of marketing strategy, you want to reach a broad audience and an increasingly broad audience. If you're trying to convert, then bringing people back to your site is absolutely critical.
Awesome. Yeah, I think that's a really good point, that you have to, depending on your audience and what your goals are, your analytics, what you're looking at needs to change. That's really good. One of the questions I know people have, Pinterest just released their new analytics for business account. So when you look at that, what do you see that was improved with their new analytics feature that Pinterest has?
Yeah, there's some really cool stuff there, and personally, we love it. I think there are a couple of really neat things that were actually asks of our users for a long time that we just didn't have the data to be able to provide. So one of those in particular is demographic information about who's interacting with your content. It was a very common ask. People wanted to know locations, gender, and so forth. Only Pinterest really has that data to be able to provide it. And so I think it's great that they're now surfacing that information. The other thing I think that's really cool there, so we could talk about this a bit more, but Pinterest really isn't a social network at the end of the day. It's
Right.
an interest-based network, or surfacing what's called the interest graph, as opposed to the social graph. And they've started to make that interest graph more obvious to users with a number of recent product innovations, one of which is within the analytics. So they now show you the interests of your users who are interacting with your brand. And I think that's something really cool that wasn't visible to people before.
Gotcha. I want to pull up this from Kim. She goes, love this. Pinterest is a place where people are telling us their interest and aspiration, a marketer's dream. So true, Daniel. So, yeah, Kim agrees with what you're saying there. One of the things is I want to bring up also is that, oh, sorry, wrong one. Here's the one I wanted to bring up. How does Tailwind compare to the existing Pinterest analytics that Pinterest itself has? So kind of what the new analytics have, and now what Tailwind has in the offering.
Yeah, so when you're looking at Pinterest analytics, I think there are a few real strong points of this, and this is Pinterest's own analytics offering. The three things I would highlight, so one is impression and reach numbers, being able to know exactly how large of an audience your pins are reaching. That's really important. The second is that audience demographic information, which is really valuable. And the third being beginning to surface the interests of your audience. Okay. I think those are the three really strong elements of the Pinterest analytics tool. When you look at Tailwind, we're serving some different use cases and really parallel use cases. So we have 4 sections to the tool. One is what we call domain monitoring, which is really a brand monitoring solution. So being able to get really deep reports and information about what's being pinned from your site, incredibly valuable if you have a lot of content on your site, whether a publisher, a retailer, e-commerce company, whatever you might be. So that's one area. The second is the key performance indicators, right? So these are the high-level metrics that very often in-house social media teams, social media consultants, or agencies are using to report on a campaign's success. So we have a section specifically about that. It starts at a high level, starts breaking it down by board and into other deeper views as well. The third section is about your community, so helping you understand who your community is, who are the advocates and influencers you should be connecting with, what are they interested in, and so forth, where can you connect with them. And then the last piece is what we call content optimization. So that's deep content level, pin level reports that help you see things like, what are my most popular pins of all time? Or a view of that, what's been trending in the last week or the last month or whatever time frame is interesting. And that helps you start to realize, okay, this type of content is performing better for me, or maybe, oh, I think I'm seeing seasonality because all of a sudden this group of pins from last year at this holiday season are beginning to spike. Maybe I should create some new pins around that theme as well.
Yeah, that's very powerful. And just from, I'm just kind of just really just scratching the surface of what Tailwind can do. But one of the things I really liked was that it told me, oh, you need to put a description on this board. You haven't done it yet. Stuff like that, which does make a difference in the long term. If you're throwing a board up or something and you forget that kind of makes a difference going along if you put them up. So that was very helpful, at least to me.
Yeah, I mean, now that you think about it, it's kind of funny. We don't market that function all that much, but yeah, we do have this section that's almost like, think of it like a Pinterest coach, right, that's going to guide you through all of the key optimization steps on your profile. And if you're missing one, of course you're free to ignore it if you don't want to do it for a reason. But at least we're going to present the options of, hey, here are 16 more things you can do to optimize your profile.
Yeah, I thought it was very helpful. Your site advertises powered by the official Pinterest Business Insights API. So tell our listeners and viewers what does that mean and why it's important.
Yeah. So first, what it means. So back in May, Pinterest announced the Pinterest Business Insights API and a smaller initial set of partners who were going to have access to it. What that means, the long and short of it is, we can work directly with Pinterest and have direct, secure access to data, which is really important. It helps protect users. It helps protect Pinterest. It helps protect us as a platform. So, API, if you don't know what that means, it's basically a way for two sites or two systems to communicate with each other and pass data up and back. So this way Pinterest knows we're a trusted source that's requesting data from them, and we're not a hacker somewhere overseas or a company that might have less than good intentions trying to access that data.
Right.
So that's what it means. I think there are some follow-on implications of that. For us, it was a real honor to be one of the very few chosen partners. We're only a 2.5-year-old company now, and to be chosen alongside companies like Salesforce and Hootsuite that have been around for a very long time was kind of a nice little pat in the back for us. So I think that's important. But what it means day to day for Tailwind is we can build products faster. We can get more reliable access to data. So there was this period in the ecosystem maybe a year or two ago where you never really knew if the data you were seeing was correct because people were scraping data and using other methods that aren't really ideal. And there are still a lot of tools out there today who aren't partners under that program, who don't have access and therefore often produce incorrect data. So I think it's a quality signal. And it helps us deliver a better, more reliable product.
Gotcha. Here's another comment. It says, thanks, Daniel. I like that third point about Tailwind. It would make a lot of difference in learning what my audience thinks. And I think that's key with using analytics. Is that's the whole reason is you're wanting to really try to dig deep and see what your audience wants more of and how you can give it to them.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, at the end of the day, we're providing a service as marketers, right? I mean, we're trying to give people information they need and they want. We're trying to connect them with products that are relevant to them, and having this type of information at a meta level, I think, is going to decrease the noise in marketing by just making more of the activity that goes on in the industry directly relevant to the people it's targeting.
Gotcha. Okay, here's kind of like maybe a kind of a real life question. Okay, I've noticed a board that has really started getting a lot of followers and repins using my analytics. So what should I do now? Is it as simple as make more stuff like that, or is there stuff you can dig deeper on? Yeah. Are you there?
I'm there. Sorry, I might have broken up for a minute there.
Sure.
Yeah, so if you see a board start to take off like that, I think there's a few different interesting strategies. The first one is, any person's only going to spend so much time pinning in a week. And, let's say that means you're going to create 50 pins a week, just to throw a number out there. The first question I'd ask is, how should I allocate those pins? If I have, 3-4 boards that are really resonating with an audience and taking off, I'm going to shift more of my pin budget, so to speak, towards those boards and put some others on the back burner that might not be working as well. So I think that's one really interesting insight. The second is it could be an indication that you actually want to invest more in total, right? So if you're starting to see a higher return on your effort, putting in more effort makes sense. And then the third, Jeff, as you suggested, was you could create offshoot boards of that specific topic. This theme is really resonating with your followers. Let's say it's generally like a classic automobiles board, then maybe something like classic motorcycles or modern automobiles or automobile design might also be good boards that you could build out that would be distinct thematically, but would be very likely to appeal to the same audience that board is already appealing to.
Gotcha. That's great advice. One of the things is I see all the time in marketing, because that's what I follow and I see a lot of. You see all those posts of the best time to post, when's the best time. Does timing of pins really make a difference?
It actually does. We've been doing a lot of research into this recently, and we're finding it can make a very, very big difference. The difficult part of it, and where I cringe every time someone says the best time to post is blank, is that the answer is different for every audience and every brand, right? If you're targeting new mothers, your audience is going to be online at a very different time than someone else who's targeting musicians, right?
Right.
And so you've got to think about your audience and ideally see the data for your own brand and your own profile instead of just believing a standard, this is the time to pin type of advice. Personally, I think experts who put out those types of suggestions are doing a disservice to the community because it's oversimplifying the analysis. One of the really cool things that we're doing now that it's been kind of hush hush, but I'll talk about it a little bit. We have a private beta test that's been running for our new publishing feature. And one of the feature sets within that is that we'll actually recommend times for you based on your specific audience, when they're active, when your individual pins are getting the greatest response, and we can factor in other details there like what's the pin about or what's the board about that the pin is going to. So there's a lot of cool angles to that to really help with the optimization, but we're seeing it can drive a pretty substantial improvement in results. So same effort in from a marketer's perspective, better results out. It's kind of an instant win.
That's awesome. That's very cool. My friend Kim says, unless you want to spend all day watching your boards and Pinterest as well, this type of analytics can be so incredibly helpful and maximizes your efforts on Pinterest. Tailwind equals optimization, so happy Pinterest released their API to these selected companies. And I think that is so true. And thanks, Kim, for your comment. And that's, the scheduling pins thing is right on that line. It's one more way to maximize your efforts and not have to do everything all the time. And
Right.
so I'm going to ask this question, and I already know the answer, but does Tailwind offer a way to schedule pins?
Yeah, so that part of that publishing suite is a scheduling solution. It is currently in private beta, meaning it requires an invitation. That said, if anyone's watching today and they want to use it, you can just shoot us an email, help@tailwindapp.com. That's our general, ping the whole team and the best person to get back to you email. But yeah, shoot us over an email. We'll be happy to get you involved. It is limited at the moment, but we're really excited about getting that out to the broader user base.
Awesome. And kind of on those same lines, here's another question. Is Tailwind a strictly paid app, or is there a scaled-down free option too?
Yeah, so there is a free option. Anyone is welcome to join for free and use the free version. The free version is definitely scaled down from the paid versions. And one piece of feedback that we've gotten, which I completely agree with actually, is that our current pricing plan is a little bit out of reach for people who are small businesses or individuals who are just getting started. I 100% agree with that. So we do have some updates that are coming that are actually going to help fix that problem, or at least we hope they will. If they don't, let us know and we'll adjust again. But we're pretty excited about that because we really do love the fact that we're one of the only platforms that does offer a free option and that does try to serve the small business and the individual user. Of course, our enterprise customers are very important to us and our business also, but we believe everyone should have access. So we're doing our best to provide as much access as we can for free or for very affordable prices.
That's awesome. That's great. I'm very excited to hear that myself. So let's dig deeper a little bit into the actual Tailwind software and marketing package, because there's some questions I got earlier this week about this. What is actually competitor tracking in Tailwind?
Yeah, sure. So the idea of that is you want to understand whether or not your results that you're getting are good. Frankly, that's the primary use case, and we get that question a lot. So okay, my repins grew from 141 to 178 week over week. How do I know if that's good? And so competitive tracking is about giving you the option to set up a competitor set that you're comparing yourself against, and then seeing how your results compare to that set of competitors. That way people can kind of define their competitor set the way that they want. It's not a one-size-fits-all definition. Like if let's say you're a small e-commerce site and the only option we gave you to compare to was retail as a category, comparing your site to Target and Walmart and Nordstrom and brands like that probably isn't a fair comparison.
Right.
But this way you can say, well, these are 5, 6, 7, 8 brands that we do view as competitive and in our space. Let's see how we're doing compared to those.
Very cool. Very cool. Yeah. So I could actually compare myself to like another blogger like Mike Alton and see, okay, because we're pretty similar. That would be a good kind of thing for me to check out.
Well, and even within blogging, right? Like you don't necessarily just want to compare yourself to other bloggers, but maybe other bloggers who cover similar spaces as you, right? And creating a competitive cohort that's really relevant to what you do.
Awesome. Good points. Good points. Here's another question that Kim asked earlier this week, and I think I see it all the time in Tailwind. What are virality and engagement scores on Tailwind, and what determines those, and how can you use those to your advantages?
Yeah, absolutely. So virality and engagement scores are there to give you a sense of that, content quality metric. So it's one thing to measure repins, but let's say you go from pinning 10 times a week to 1,000 times a week. There's a very good chance your repins are going to grow, right? So a more interesting question is my content getting better over time? Is it more effective? Are more people repinning it relative to the amount that I'm pinning? So virality score helps you normalize for the amount of pins that you put out there. So whether you're pinning 10 times a week or 1,000 times a week, it's giving you a sense of how viral is that content, which could help you understand if you're over pinning or under pinning. Engagement is another take on that metric, which actually normalizes for your follower growth over time. Because another example, if you're pinning 10 times a week, but all of a sudden your followers double over a month, you should expect to see a lot more repins per pin that you put out there. So normalizing by follower count, which is the engagement score, gives you a more accurate understanding of how engaged your audience is with the content you're putting.
Gotcha. That's a powerful tool right there. So the other question that I have for you, and this is another one from Kim, is how do the category heat maps relate to the new interest options from Pinterest?
Sure. So they are related, but they're different, I would say. So the interest options from Pinterest are much more specific. All right. So you might find, for instance, that under Pinterest interest options, your Pinterest followers are interested in fish tacos, which is one of the interests that I'm actually following personally on Pinterest.
Gotcha.
It's a very, very specific insight. Sometimes that insight is right on and really helps a marketer figure out what to do next. Sometimes it can be too granular. So what our category heat map does is takes that up a level and helps you understand, based on categories of content, food and beverage versus travel versus weddings, for instance, how are your followers responding to your content in those categories? So similar to the board optimization we talked about before, you can optimize across categories and say, wow, I'm actually getting a really good response when I post travel-related images. I didn't realize that. I might pin more in travel or find a way to evolve my travel boards to maybe fit another category. So maybe I'm a food company. I could create travel food boards that are about food from around the world, right? But now I at least know that my followers like that type of travel imagery, and I can lean into that in order to navigate into the message that I ultimately want to deliver.
That's awesome. And we got some more comments I wanted to pull up from Laura Williams. Says that is great news, talking about the changes. I love it when a company listens to its customers, and that is so true. And then Kim also says, very excited for you. This scheduling option is going to be a big game changer through Tailwind's platform. We'll be following along to see when you release it to the public. So there's already some excitement brewing about your announcements that you said today. So,
well, thanks. That's great to hear. I mean, one thing I will say is our entire company from the beginning has been all about the feedback that we've gotten. I mean, our first analytics dashboard, if I could show it to someone, I think had like 3 graphs on it. It was super, super simple. Actually, in the early days, we built them by hand and sent them through Google spreadsheets. So, where Tailwind is today really is just an aggregation of our 20+ thousand users who have provided constant feedback over the last 2 years to help us understand what you want. So please keep it coming. We'd love to hear it, especially the stuff that's where we're not meeting your needs or where something isn't working the way you want, because that helps us learn how to do it better for you.
Gotcha. Here's another question from Elisa. She says, I have the free option. What key feature would you guess that I'm not using to the full?
Sure. So one of the reports that on the free option that I would really recommend digging into is the pin inspector report. It doesn't have your entire pin history, but it does show you pin level performance. Actually, for some accounts, it might have the entire pin history. It depends on how many pins you have. But it will help you understand specifically which pins are performing, which you can often get a sense of for your biggest pin. So, like, I personally have a pin that I think is nearing about 2,000 from a few months ago, and I'm constantly every day getting updates from Pinterest that more people have repinned that pin. But if you ask me beyond that pin, I have no idea what my next 10 or 20 best pins are without looking at my Tailwind dashboard. So helping you understand, beyond those top couple of pins, what has resonated with your audience, because not every pin is going to be a viral hit, and that's okay. If you increase the performance of your average pin, you'll both get more viral hits over time, and you'll increase your kind of latent ROI every day underneath that. So I think that report's really important, and it can lead to a lot of optimization. I would definitely check it out.
Awesome. Thank you for that great advice. I have two more questions that I ask pretty much all my guests. The first one is, what was your biggest mistake you think you did when you first started on Pinterest?
Ooh, wow, that's a good question. This one might sound a little weird, but given the pivot that we went through early on, I think our biggest mistake was not doing it sooner. I think if we would have pivoted to the model that we're in today 3 months or 4 months earlier, we would just be that much further along our roadmap, and that much further along in helping serve our users. So, for a startup, speed is everything. And so, for me personally, I think that's probably the biggest one. In terms of my own pinning activity, I think I was actually a pretty low volume pinner in the beginning on my own profile, and I've definitely stepped up the frequency over time, and that's led to me creating much stronger relationships with my followers and with other people across Pinterest. And so, I wish I probably would have made that change sooner. It was kind of hard while also building the company to spend a lot of time pinning, but I think I'm doing a better job of it now.
Awesome. The other question I want to ask is, this is the Manly Pinterest Tip Show, and it's always, everyone thinks Pinterest is for women, but what advice would you give to guys who are just getting started on Pinterest?
Yeah, sure. So, the first thing I would say is look for the content you're interested in. Right? Pinterest has, a now very prominently displayed search bar in the new redesign that's rolling out. Use it. It's incredibly powerful. Even if your initial feed has content that's not relevant to you, if you start searching for what you are interested in there and then following some categories, repinning some pins, building some boards, Pinterest is going to very quickly learn about you personally and deliver the right content for you. And really, Pinterest isn't a platform for women. It's a platform for anyone who shares any interests. Maybe the second piece of advice I would say is, I think gender lines are actually breaking down in terms of what people can and should be interested in. So, my wife really loved gardening. She's gotten me more interested in it recently. There's a guy named Dan Ashback who I think does a great job of pinning garden and outdoor related pins, and I love looking at the stuff that he pins. Own it, right? Don't feel like you have to fit some cookie cutter mold of who you are. Own your interests. They can be whatever they are. Just use the platform to tailor it to what you're interested in, and it'll become very interesting for you. So, I guess those would be my two pieces of advice.
Well, those are great, and I echo both of those myself. I think those are great for pin your interest. And there's tons of stuff for pretty much anybody on Pinterest. So, last question is, where can we find out about you and Tailwind and stuff like that?
Yeah, absolutely. So for Tailwind, we're tailwindapp.com. That's our website. Please come check us out. You can create a free account in like 30 seconds. I'd love to hear your feedback. For me personally, I'm Daniel P. Maloney on Pinterest, on Twitter, on pretty much every platform. I think that's my LinkedIn handle too. So feel free to shoot me an invite. Would love to connect on any platform. And if I can answer any questions or be a resource, tweet at me, shoot me an email. I'm Danny@tailwindapp.com, and I try to make myself as available as possible. So just let me know what I can do.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much, Danny, for being here. I appreciate it so much. And as always, the people who are listening and watching, I'd love for you to go over to manlypinteresttips.com, click on the sidebar, and subscribe to our email community so you'll never miss out on a great guest that we have on our shows like Danny. So thanks so much for watching, everyone, because, we're always adding testosterone one pin at a time. And I'll see you next time, everybody. Thanks for watching.